Tides and currents are two of the most important factors that influence the behavior of saltwater fish. Whether you're fishing from shore, a pier, or a boat, understanding how tides and currents work can greatly increase your chances of success. In fact, many experienced saltwater anglers rely on tide and current knowledge to determine when and where to fish. In this video, we'll explore the science behind tides and currents, how they affect saltwater fishing, and strategies you can use to take advantage of these natural forces. What are tides and currents? Tides are the rise and fall of sea levels caused by the gravitational pull of the moon and, to a lesser extent, the sun. Tides follow a predictable cycle, with 2 high tides and 2 low tides occurring each day in most coastal areas. Currents, on the other hand, refer to the horizontal movement of water. These are driven by several factors, including tides, wind, and the rotation of the Earth. In saltwater fishing, tidal currents, those generated by the rise and fall of the tides, are especially significant. Understanding tides and currents. Fish are highly attuned to the movement of water and often position themselves in areas where tidal currents bring food their way. By knowing how tides and currents affect the behavior of fish, you can plan your fishing trips more strategically. 1. Tides will impact fish. Feeding patterns. Most saltwater fish are opportunistic feeders that use the movement of water to their advantage. As the tide rises or falls, fish will often feed aggressively, taking advantage of the bait and prey that are carried along with the current. Rising tides, flood tide. As the tide comes in, fish are drawn closer to shore, reefs, and other structures where food becomes more abundant. This is often a great time to target species like redfish, snook, and flounder. Falling tides, ebb tide. As the tide goes out, baitfish and other prey are pulled away from shorelines and shallows, attracting predators. Many anglers find falling tides to be just as productive as rising tides, particularly in areas like inlets, channels, and passes where water funnels through. Slack tide. This occurs during the brief period between the transition of tides, when water movement slows down. Fish tend to be less active during slack tide, making it one of the least productive times to fish. Most anglers focus on the stronger water movement during rising or falling tides for better results. 2. Currents can determine fish positioning. Fish often position themselves in areas where they can conserve energy while still having access to food carried by the current. This means they're likely to be found near structures like reefs, wrecks, and drop-offs, where water movement creates feeding opportunities. Current breaks. Fish like to gather behind objects that break the current, such as rocks, pilings, or underwater ledges. These breaks provide fish with a spot to rest while waiting for food to pass by. Inlets and passes. Areas where water flows through a narrow space, such as inlets or passes, are often hot spots for saltwater fishing. The concentrated water flow brings baitfish and other prey to predators, making these spots ideal for targeting larger fish. 3. Tidal influence on specific species. Different species of fish respond to tides and currents in unique ways. Here are a few examples. Redfish, red drum. Redfish are often found in shallow areas during rising tides, as they search for crabs, shrimp, and small fish pushed into the shallows. During low tides, they tend to move into deeper channels. Striped bass. Striped bass thrive in areas with strong tidal currents, such as estuaries and river mouths. They tend to feed aggressively during moving tides, especially at the beginning and end of tidal changes. Snook. These fish are highly active during strong tidal flows, particularly around structures like docks and bridges. Snook prefer to position themselves where they can ambush prey being swept by the current. How to use tides and currents to your advantage. Now that we've covered how tides and currents affect fish behavior, let's dive into practical strategies for incorporating this knowledge into your saltwater fishing trips. 1. Plan your fishing trip. Around the tides, most saltwater anglers plan their trips to coincide with the most productive tidal phases. As a general rule, the 2 hours before and after a high or low tide are often the best times to fish. Many tide apps and charts are available to help you track tide cycles and plan your trips accordingly. Best times. Focus on rising or falling tides when water movement is strongest. These periods increase the chances of finding feeding fish. Local conditions. Keep in mind that tidal strength and timing can vary based on location. For example, some areas may experience stronger tides due to geographic factors like narrowing channels or large tidal ranges. Knowing your local fishing environment will help you time your outings more effectively. 2. Use structure to your advantage. Structures such as jetties, bridges, reefs, and sandbars create natural current breaks, making them prime locations for saltwater fishing. Fish tend to gather near these structures, particularly during times of strong tidal movement. Casting around structure. Cast your bait or lures around these areas, where fish are likely waiting to ambush prey brought by the current. Be mindful of your casting angles and line positioning to ensure your bait moves naturally with the current. Anchoring in current. When fishing from a boat, anchoring just up current from a structure allows you to present your bait or lures naturally as they drift toward the structure. This mimics the movement of prey and entices fish to strike. 3. Target inlets and channels. Inlets, channels, and passes are some of the best places to fish during tidal changes. These areas concentrate the flow of water, creating a feeding frenzy for fish. Fishing inlets. Focus on the areas where the current is strongest, particularly at the edges of the flow where fish are likely to hold. Using live bait or jigs that mimic the movement of bait fish in the current can yield great results. Working channels. In deeper water, fish often position themselves at the bottom of channels, where they can ambush prey being carried by the current. Using a weighted rig or jig that can reach the bottom is often effective in these areas. 4. Consider wind direction. Wind can enhance or counteract the effect of tides and currents, so it's essential to consider wind direction when planning your fishing trip. Wind pushing water. If the wind is pushing water in the same direction as the tidal current, it can strengthen the flow and increase fish activity. Conversely, when the wind opposes the tide, it can weaken the current and reduce water movement, making fish less active. Fishing. Windy days. On windy days, focus on areas where the wind and tide work together to push bait fish toward shorelines or structures. These areas often become hotspots for feeding fish. Tools and resources for tracking tides and currents. In today's digital age, tracking tides and currents has never been easier. Here are some tools and resources that can help you stay on top of these important factors. Tide charts and apps. Tide apps such as TideGraph Pro or websites like NOAA Tides and Currents provide detailed information about local tide cycles and current strength. Marine weather forecasts. Websites and apps like Windy or Fish Weather offer detailed forecasts for wind, tides, and currents, helping you plan your fishing trips with precision. Fishing guides. Many fishing guides offer local tide and current information, helping you understand how these factors affect specific areas and species. Understanding how tides and currents affect saltwater fishing is a game changer for any angler. By aligning your trips with the tidal phases and using current-driven strategies, you can increase your chances of success and make your time on the water more productive. Whether you're fishing from the shore, a pier, or a boat, keeping these natural forces in mind will help you land more fish and enjoy your saltwater fishing experience to the fullest. So next time you head out on the water, don't just cast and hope. Use the tides and currents to your advantage and watch your catch rate soar. If you enjoy this type of content, please be sure to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.